13. It happened on this afternoon that personally, where I was seated back at home watching the sevens that was happening in Kasarani Nyayo Stadium. So watching the matches on NTV Live. And again, all of a sudden we got the breaking news that a mall has been attacked. So it happened back in 2013, 21st of September. Ironically, they chose the World International Peace Day to carry out that unfortunate incident. The total number of casualties, as you can see on your screen, was 71, 62 of them being civilians that some of them, unfortunately, they say to have been caught in exchanging fire. Total number of injuries from that fateful incident is 200, of course, cases of mass shooting, so they say. Quite unfortunate as well. Apparently, the Kenyan government got warning from the United Nations a month before, which was in August, and then Nairobi Senator Mike Mbuvi Sonko came out and said that he had warned the government about this fateful incidents 3 months prior. According to Jicho Pevu, an expose that was done by the current Nyali Member of Parliament, Honorable Muhammad Ali, say that there were 4 people who carried out the operation at the Westgate attack. But again, according to the BBC World News, in an article published 30th October 2020, said that the gunmen were 10 to 15 gunmen who were in that particular building. And of course, this is courtesy of the briefings that they were given by the government. In October 2020, Hussein Hassan, as you can see on your screen, and Ahmed Abdi were actually convicted to 18 and 33 years of prison respectively, because these were people who were found to be the mastermind behind the fateful attack. Now, thank you so much, Dr. Ali, for joining us. And we just want to have a look at some of the lessons that we got from this fateful incident. And of course, moving forward, bearing in mind that we are in a political season and heading into one of the hotly contested general elections, how peaceful are we in this country? Of course, coming at a time or a week where we commemorated the World International Peace Day. Dr. Khannenje, thanks so much for making time for us this evening.
Thanks for having me.
MashaAllah. So, Dr. Khannenje, first things first, what's your opinion on how the government of Kenya responded to the Westgate attack?
I think the Westgate attack was a defining moment in Kenya's history with terrorism. Never before had we ever been attacked so directly and so devastatingly as the attack that took place on during the Westgate attack. Now, the reason I'm saying this is because previous attacks, especially like the major attacks, going back to 1998, for instance, it was seen mostly as we looked ourselves as victims, that we were caught under, between the crossfire of Al Qaeda and of course the United States and its Western allies. However, this was very purposeful, was very well planned, very well organized, and well executed. Now, it's easy sometimes, of course, to poke holes, especially when it comes to security apparatus. But when it comes with the problem of terror, you can never be too prepared. And I think unless you've experienced something closer home of that magnitude, sometimes we tend to be a little bit complacent. And when you compare the response, for instance, during the Westgate and the subsequent response during the Dusit a few years ago, you realize there is enormous difference. I think the security apparatus are a little more robust. There are specific, of course, services that are supposed to be dealing with that. The casualties were way less than they would have. And so the things that have been learned from what some people may have perceived as a debacle of, in 2013, and a lot of it had to do with probably what I would say lack of anticipation. I don't think the country had prepared sufficiently for an attack as sophisticated and as well coordinated as that one.
Of course, after the 99 attack, this is regarded as one of the deadliest terror attack that we got as a country, again, that happened on Kenyan soil. So as a security expert and analyst, do you think this attack shaped the way or the conversation on how terrorism has been defined in this country and the region at large?
In many ways it did, because it was a massive wake-up call, and the entire world at that point was actually focused on Nairobi and what was happening. But then it also spoke to the lethal nature of the threat we are facing. And in many ways, it is viewed as an existential threat, not exactly because it's about to destroy states, but it can cause a lot of damage and a lot of harm. Now, since that time, we see a lot more coordination between countries and security agencies, not just in the region, but with the rest of the world. There's a lot more robust mechanism of dealing with terrorism. However, the problem has not decreased. It has actually proliferated. It has increased, has grown, especially when, if you have to look at it from the prism of the Horn of Africa region. It has, right now, as we're speaking, it's all the way to Mozambique in Cabo Delgado, in Congo, the Allied Democratic Forces, in Somalia, because of the dysfunctional nature of the government there, the problem has not exactly reduced. And this is a cause for concern, and is a cause that Kenyans should pay very close attention to, because I think all of us have an obligation to play our little role in ensuring, or rather in ensuring that our communities and our countries are safe.
Daktari, until we are in this situation, the regional or Somali-based militia Al-Shabaab claimed responsibility of this particular attack, and they based this attack on the illegal occupation or operation that our country, Kenya, together with other African forces, together they formed the AMISOM leading in Somalia. And they say that whatever they were doing in Somalia, or they are doing in Somalia, is what they are coming to pay back in this country. So, again, your opinion, do you think it's time to pull back as a country, as a people, so as to protect our soil? Because as recent as the other year, we had the Dusit attack as well. And I don't think you're going to see an end to this, according to Somalia-based Al-Shabaab, until we completely get out of their land and leave their businesses alone.
I think the issue of withdrawal, especially for AMISOM forces, and whether that's contributing, as claimed by Al-Shabaab, to the reason or the rationale for, increased attacks against not just Kenya but in the region. The debate is a fair debate to have. And, just based on what we have seen around the world, it's, you cannot have AMISOM in Somalia ad infinitum. It has to come to an end at some point. But let's face it, we have to deal with the world as it is, not as what, as it should be, which of course is more idealistic. Today as we speak, Somalia does not have capacity to be able to protect its own people and to defend its own territory. Any precipitous withdrawal of AMISOM forces, you're going to see Talibanization of Somalia, or what we'll call Al-Shababanization of Somalia. The truth is, there is no specific force that has the capacity in Somalia to be able to maintain law and order. And so, unless the institutions, and especially the security sector and the legal sector, they are built and they're given sufficient capacity to be able to secure Somalia, right now, any precipitous withdrawal of AMISOM is going to be a disaster, not just for the Somali people, but for the entire region. And it may lead to some catastrophic consequences that I don't think anyone is actually prepared to handle.
How then do we ensure that we protect our people from such horrendous and horrible attacks then, even as the army is leading the operations in Somalia?
Yeah, the Kenya Defense Forces are in Somalia under the auspices of AMISOM. And so a lot of times it's not about the Kenya Defense Force, but it's actually the AMISOM forces generally. Their mandate is, AMISOM mandate is not, they're not there, so they cannot just wake up and withdraw, for instance. However, I think one thing that's going to be important is that the international community and regional countries find a formula of ensuring that, number one, there is a peaceful transition in Somalia to a government that is popular and representative. Number two, that the security sector and there is some sort of integration of different factions and militaries, because as we speak, what we have, as demonstrated in recent months in Mogadishu, there is very little loyalty when it comes to the security apparatus to the government, you know. And so Mogadishu can collapse any time, especially if things do not go well. Now, one thing that everybody is afraid of is the uncertainty created by these coming elections. You can see right now there are competing interests within Somalia itself. Even the government, you know, let's say the Prime Minister and the President, they don't seem to be reading from the same script. This is a recipe, you know, for conflict. And the federal member states, for instance, they don't seem to be speaking the same language with the central government. And so, in the absence of an alternative framework, security framework that can replace AMISOM, it's extremely dangerous and risky. Now, these are risks that these countries have to be willing to take. It means that countries, especially frontier countries such as Kenya, they need to be vigilant, but at the same time, to work towards stabilizing Somalia in ways that ultimately there are not going to be foreign forces in Somalia, and Somalia is not going to be a threat, at least to its neighbors, when it comes to the problem of terrorism.
For as far as vigilance is concerned, we tend to be pointing fingers to the government and the security apparatus of which we pay taxes. We have all the rights to. But again, in terms of numbers and the work to be done, of course, I think it needs a collective effort and collective responsibility in this case in war against terror and peace and security. So in this case, in your opinion and your expertise, how would you suggest or recommend that citizens, the common Mwananchi, you and I, take part for as far as ensuring security, peace, and...
I suspect those challenges are improving, but as Muslims, I think communities need to be organized properly to contribute to that. And so if there are certain injustices that are leading, let's say, to fear of us, for instance, being able to work with government, we need to be able to address that. The solution is not complaining or holding press conferences to condemn things when we are never on the table, when those things are being discussed, and that is how we always end up on the menu as victims. And so it is important to take it up upon ourselves, and especially as Muslim communities, to know that this security is ours right now, increasingly. Young men and women who are being radicalized, they come from our community. They are our children, they are our brothers and sisters. As we speak, not less than 100 university students from Kenya, Muslims, they joined Al-Qaeda, they joined ISIS. They are as far as Syria. You know, the government has not sent them there. Some of them are from medicine, some of them from engineering. What is our role? What role are we playing when we see stuff like this happen? And so there has also been a general sense of complacence amongst us because we outsourced our civic responsibility as citizens and Muslims in this country to say that we are going to play a rightful role, and we are going also to find a way in places where, let's say, there are gaps within government, we're going to come together to make sure we address them. But in cases where there are gaps within our own communities, we're going to figure out a way of solving it.
Dr. Interesting points you're bringing in there. But again, if you're talking about addressing, for example, radicalization, right? This is something that has been ongoing for quite some time now. But of course, I cannot finish this point without giving due credit to the Horn Institute and building resilience against violence extremism. But again, the government that is supposed to be the leading agent in this multi-sectoral agency is actually addressing radicalization by the combat and end up radicalizing more people in that case or in that sense. So if you're talking about addressing these issues, we are failing to address the issues as a Muslim community, and the Muslim leaders are failing to address these issues. Address it to who? Address it to which people? Yet, one, the approach of this war from the onset is not the best. And then secondly, Muslims ourselves, and I can say this categorically, we are being profiled and victimized in that matter. So how then do we go ahead and fight, yet we are seen as part of the enemy?
Faisal, that's a brilliant observation and a brilliant question, actually. And I think a lot of Muslims, are not just in Kenya, but around the world, they feel profiled. If you travel, you're going to be frisked. I've been randomly picked on 3 occasions, the only person at the airport, you know, for extra checks. You know, until I had to raise those questions, like, you know, I have taught statistics, and that is not how probability works. However, we need to understand the world we're living in. In this country, and in a world which is not ruled, for instance, by Muslims, we will need to find a way of having a voice. Now, one challenge has been that there was a lot of reluctance by Muslims to work with security agencies. And part of it because also of the stereotype, of course, and some of the perception and profiling that was going on. Increasingly, right now there are certain mechanisms being put in place by government that Muslims can be able to work through. Unfortunately, this information is also not very available to a lot of people. And some of the previous hard power responses have actually served to make things worse. Now, when it comes to the history of terrorism or radicalization or even insurgency, you cannot bomb or shoot your way out of terror. There have to be soft approaches in dealing with it. Because every time you kill one person, you may radicalize 20 or even 100.
Sorry, just to cut you short. You say that hard approach doesn't necessarily work. You cannot work your way out of terror with bombs and guns and weapons. And you need to use soft approach. Can you give us a case study of one place that it worked, a soft approach, that it worked and flushed out terrorism completely? Is there any in the world?
Number one, Sudan has been fairly successful in actually reintegrating some of the people who had gone to join Mujahideen. Egypt has also been fairly successful in trying to bring back, people who had gone to fight in foreign theaters. Kenya right now, there are a number of programs both by government and the civil society, including our brave Building Resilience Against Violent Extremism, that is working with both at risk.
Skirmishes from the Kobil attack, when the deputy president was attacked at the Kobil. Jimmy Wanjigi, another presidential candidate, was attacked the other day in Migori County. Raila Odinga's car was pelted with stones the other day. So basically we've seen acts of violence here and there. If it's not an indicator of skirmishes in this coming election, then I don't know what you're waiting for. Please hold it there. We're going for a very short break, and we're going to be back. We are also streaming live on Facebook and YouTube. You can as well type in your comment there, and again the numbers on your screen, 07547077707 is our number. You can as well text us on WhatsApp, and let's see what you have to say. Contribute to this topic, inshallah. We're going to be back after this short break.
Horizon TV, the beacon for the nation.
Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن محمدًا رسول الله أشهد أن محمدًا رسول الله حي على الصلاة حي على الصلاة حي على الفلاح حي على الفلاح الله أكبر الله أكبر لا إله إلا الله.
Uislamu ni dini yenye mpangilio ulio kamili na taratibu zake humpa fursa kila mja kuifahamu na kuelewa.
Muislamu yoyote lazima achukue jukumu la kuifahamu dini yake, kuanzia kwenye shahada, ashhadu, nakiri kwa moyo,
kisha usafi wa kimwili.
Hapo ndipo huanza safari ya kumwabudu Mola wake.
Usikose kujiunga nasi kila siku ya Jumamosi live kwenye kipindi Ufahamu Uislamu, ili ujifunze mengi usiyojua kutoka Horizon TV.
Horizon TV, the beacon for the nation.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome back. My name is Faisal, Kassim, and this is the live Real Talk. As I said, tonight we'll be talking about war on terror, keeping the vigil. Like, how do we play part? Terror can be interpreted in many ways. Of course, not the conventional or the world order's definition of terror. We're going by the dictionary's definition of terror, of which can be terrorism even by your neighbor. So for as far as terrorism is concerned, we're being as objective as possible in this case. Sheikh Dr. Hassan Khannenje, thank you so much for making time for us this evening again.
Thanks.
Karibu sana, Daktari. Daktari, moving forward with our conversation, this week we commemorated the World International Peace Day. How peaceful do you think we are as a people, as a country, living in Kenya right now?
I think the World Peace Day is an aspirational objective by international community, perhaps to help us reflect and have an introspection of where we want to go as the world, but critically in Kenya is which direction we should go as a country. Now, it's not something that was paid a lot of attention by Kenya or Kenyan media, but it's something that is very, very important. Now, how peaceful are we? Well, we are certainly more peaceful than we were in 2017 and 2018.
Mm-hmm.
And frankly speaking, I think the handshake did help, whether or not you agree with it. It did help bring some semblance of reasonableness and peacefulness in the country.
Mm-hmm.
However, we are moving into rather very uncertain but yet familiar cycle. That's the election cycle of 2022. And because of the tendency for us to balkanize the country as a way of political aggrandizement, the danger is that if some of the things that our politicians are not doing right now, especially amidst extreme unemployment, poverty, and sense of helplessness caused in part by COVID-19, but also just, the economy has not been doing very well, it may be a recipe for very bad things for the country. And where we've come from in 2007 is not a place we want to go back. And I think as Kenyans and as the Muslim community, we need to rise up and play our rightful role, and perhaps speak also a lot more forcefully that our young men, especially, they're not going to be used, and neither are we going to be abused for political expediency, because politicians have been very good at doing that.
So you say, one, we are peaceful, but certainly not where we're supposed to be. Because
No.
I just want to quote the proverbial by Jane Addams, said that true peace is not a merely absence of war, but the presence of justice. So you mean that we are a just nation, just country? Are we?
I think justice, again, is something we are trying to work towards. The country suffers from a lot of social, legal, economic, and political contradictions. That achievement of justice is not something you can actually discuss right now. Because we need a fairer country, a more equitable country. Don't mean a socialist country, but a more equitable, a fairer, a country that is a little bit less corrupt, and a country that exploits the poor a little less. Because one thing we have lost in this country is ethics. We don't have it anymore. And the kind of superstructure that exists right now does not exactly seem to understand the needs of Kenya, neither do many of the politicians understand the national interest of the country. And because they're driven more by their personal interest, that is what makes it difficult for us to gain justice or to gain what we call positive peace.
Dr. You said that we are peaceful more than we were in 2017. We are peaceful more than we were in 2013 and the other elections, but of course nothing compared to the 2007 208 PEV. And may God forbid, right, this country to go back into that bad situation. So, Dr. It is 10 months to the election. That is in 2022 general election. I think 11 to 10 months, technically speaking, give or take. And we've already seen some acts of drums of war, for lack of a better word. Drums of war. We've seen indicators, we've seen signs, we've seen presidential hopeful or aspirant Jimmy Wanjigi being stoned in Migori County. We've seen high political intolerance in this country. We've seen Raila Odinga's motorcade, which is also presidential hopeful, being pelted with stones in Githurai. We've seen the deputy president's entourage being interrupted. We've seen Gideon Moy's entourage being interrupted as well. So basically it's one incident after the other. Of course, courtesy of high political intolerance, the political stakes are so high in this country. So, and we are, like, as I say, 10 months to the general election, Dr. I think this are big indicators and huge red flags if it's anything to go by, right?
Yes.
How do we circumvent all these situations and ensure peaceful campaigns and election? Of course, talking as a citizen, and how do we citizens actually do that?
Faisal, when you travel the world, especially in advanced countries, almost no one runs a red light or a stoplight. Why? Because the punishment is sure and is guaranteed, and you know what it is. People only run red lights when they can get away with it. And the reason we're seeing these things happen is because those who do it to Gideon Moi, they get away with it, and guess what? It sends a message to somebody else to do it, to Raila Odinga, or to Ruto, or even to the president. I think it's about time, and not just as government, but also as communities, to reject violence amongst ourselves. And so, if someone has broken a law, or you know they were throwing stones, and the police comes around, even if it's your brother, please hand him over. Because that's going to be the only way to be able to ensure that yourself, you won't be stoned when you are elsewhere in the country. Secondly, the institutions that are charged with the responsibility of enforcing law, they need to prosecute these people, and the punishment need to be costly. It's not just condemning violence, it's actually acting against violence. Only that will it act as a deterrent to actually bad behavior. For many of people who are watching even this program right now, they have children. And when a kid gets away with one thing today, he will get away with it tomorrow again. And then it's going to keep pushing the button. But the moment they understand their boundaries and the punishment is assured, they tend to change behavior. And so as a country, and as we move towards the election, let's take it upon ourselves, but also hold those who are responsible to account, especially those who are responsible for maintaining law and order in our communities.
You give an idealistic scenario and an example, asking, like, for example, if it were my brother who pelted the stone, I should hand him over to the police, Dr. But brother aside, if today a leader from a particular community is arrested or arraigned in court, or rather summoned by the EACC, then you'll see people from the said community going and marching to the Integrity Center with banners and, you know, mtu wetu, the mtu wetu culture. So if we cannot stand the demigods, political demigods, they're not about our kinsmen. What about our biological relatives, Dr. Is that idealistic in this country?
Yeah, actually it is.
Is it realistic?
It is idealistic.
It's idealistic, but
democracy,
is it realistic?
Democracy is an ideal. Democracy, coexistence is an ideal. Naturally, human beings tend to be very selfish. And so it's only certain sanctions that forces them to exist with each other, to live with a neighbor you don't actually like very much, you know. And so if we start holding people to account, including, because we have to start with our own. If everybody has to protect their own, then we don't have any moral ground to accuse other people of doing the same thing to us.
But again, all along we've been living as a capitalist kind of country. We're not a socialist state, actually. I think that's...
Well, capitalism is not a license to violence. In as far as I'm concerned, a lot of leading capitalist countries are actually relatively very safe. And the reason is because many people, they're not going to sit idly by. You've committed something, and because also the legal framework says, well, if you see something and you don't report, you're culpable. You understand?
Accomplice.
You're an accomplice. And so you are going to be prosecuted sometimes equally, just as the offender. But if we don't start to do that with our families and our family members, if we protect our corrupt because they are related to us, guess what? We're going to lose the country. There will be nothing left to protect.
Wow. 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 That's great. Now, done with those citizens. You said those of us who have no power, we are down here, the voters. Dr. has said it. We take the responsibility, we take the mantle by ourselves. What about the Muslim leaders and, of course, our imam, preachers and...
Faisal, a Muslim Arab ambassador, a friend of mine, during Eid, during Ramadan, once asked me that is there Muslim identity in this country, and I asked him why. He said because whenever I get visitations by Muslim groups, it's either composed of one ethnicity or one race. If Muslims were an ethnic group, for instance, they will be the largest ethnic group in Kenya. Politically, they will be the ones with the numbers, or what Nguyen likes to refer to, the tyranny of the numbers. Muslims will have the tyranny of the numbers. What has gone wrong is because a lot of times we are too divided and we do not understand the power of being united and having a common agenda to be able to advance. Any minority in a country, if it's not united and working together purposefully and strategically, is always going to be exploited. I happen to have lived in the United States for about 14 years. And one thing I know is, while it's easy, especially in the Muslim world, for us to come up with conspiracies about Jewish people, the truth is, I've not seen any plan by Jewish people. What I've seen is that they are very organized, they are very strategic, and they work together. And that is why, while they only comprise about 2% of the US population, their political influence is so large that you could think they're probably 40% of the US population. A lot of it had to do with the discipline of purpose, unity of purpose. That is something that is lacking in Kenya. We are never or rarely on the table where things are being discussed. We are easy to be exploited by politicians. We want to go and speak on their behalf. We take this camp and that camp, and that is why sometimes we cannot get respected. And so we wait until bad things happen to us for us to hold press conferences and complain and cry foul about what is happening. I think it's about time I want to ask my fellow Muslim sisters and brothers that we need to start writing our own history and be able to control our destiny, because if we do not, then we are going to keep complaining forever.
Wow, wow, powerful words right there from Dr. Hassan Khannenje. I'm being told Faisal, I should be wrapping up this conversation because of time. I'm actually literally remaining with seconds. Dr. I'm just going to share my few seconds remaining with you for you to give us your parting shot tonight as we are wrapping up this show on the live rotor. Please, Dr.
Once upon a time, the problem of terror and extremism was seen as something that is foreign to us, and rightly so. How it started, Kenyan Muslim didn't have exactly a role in it. It was something that, of course, came from abroad, and we found ourselves to be victims. Now, increasingly, though, we're finding ourselves where we are involved in this. Reason, not only are our children being the perpetrators, but we're actually victims. Terrorism has killed more Muslims than it has ever killed anybody else in the world. And so this is our problem. One thing that we need to remember as a community is that we are the change we seek. We are the ones we have been waiting for to make a difference. And if we don't take it upon ourselves an obligation, not just to the country, but especially to the Ummah, that we have to play our rightful role, it's going to be very challenging for us to change our fortunes. But inshallah, if we are able to start working together purposely and strategically, I think the fortunes of Kenya, and even the kind of problem we face of terrorism, and generally the sense of Muslim marginalization is going to be something of the past. And I think that's my parting shot for tonight.
Jazakallah khair. Thanks so much, Dr. Ari. And I cannot think of anything else but just to add an ayah on what you said. Allah says, وَمَا أَصَابَكُم مِّن مُّصِيبَةٍ فَبِمَا كَسَبَتْ أَيْدِيكُم. Nothing will afflict you, but it will be as a result of your own hands. So, again, I always say it. Every time we're pointing a finger, then 3 fingers are pointing back at us. So what exactly do you do to contribute to that particular situation? If you're not part of the solution, then you're definitely part of the problem. Talk of terrorism globally and locally, talk of lack of peace and justice globally and locally, from your own house to your neighborhood to your county and country at large. My name is Faisal, Kassim, and this has been the live Real Talk. See you next week, same place, same time, as we will be handling yet another conversation or another topic that you will be interested to learn more about. Thanks so much. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.